community.
Holy Week marks the last few days before the crucifixion of Prophet Jesus. The crucifixion is an event which Muslims also believe took place. For Muslims and Christians alike, this is a time to reflect upon the true mission and message of Jesus, a chosen one of God and a devout follower of the Torah. But in order to understand Jesus and follow his pious example, we need to discover the true account of his life. So let us examine what happened in the days before and after the crucifixion, also known as the Holy Week.
It begins with Passion Sunday, and how we start is the Sunday before Easter Sunday. It's 1 week before Easter Sunday. So on that day we actually listen to the Passion, which means the suffering of Christ, and we listen to that story of him going into Jerusalem, of being crucified, dying and burying, and we leave it at that. So that begins our Holy Week or our Passion Week and focuses for Easter Sunday. It's also called Palm Sunday because part of the story is that Christ enters into Jerusalem and the people of Jerusalem are so happy to see him that they go out and throw palms at his feet like he's a king. They treat him like a king or like a prophet.
Holy Week is the final week of Lent before Easter. It commemorates the events immediately preceding the crucifixion and the last week of Jesus' life. This is the most solemn period during the church year. Christians devoutly observe this week, commemorating the Passion and Jesus' death on the cross. Holy Week observances began in Jerusalem in the earliest days of the church, when devout Christians travelled to Jerusalem to reenact events of the week prior to Jesus' crucifixion. The earliest days of the church were during the first centuries after the time of Jesus, when Paul constituted the church, and it was being formed. Over the centuries, the fathers, then the popes, took over. Later, the denominations crept in with their own views, but the main body is the Catholic Church. The Holy Week marks the final days of Jesus before Easter Sunday. It consists of Palm Sunday, Holy Monday, Holy Tuesday, Holy Wednesday, Maundy Thursday, Good Friday and Holy Saturday. The final 3 days are part of the Easter or Paschal Triduum. Holy Week originated during the 2nd century.
The week before Easter, it starts off with Palm Sunday, which is the Sunday before Easter Sunday. Jesus makes a triumphant entry into Jerusalem. He's acclaimed by the crowds. They're all out waving palm branches, cheering him as the Son of David, and it's a wonderful, there's a sense of joy, and then straight away in the middle of the Palm Sunday liturgy at Mass it changes to an anticipation of the Passion, and then all of that week you're getting readings. The Old Testament readings are about the suffering servant which is prophesied in the prophet Isaiah, and he has these songs anticipating this mysterious servant of God that was going to suffer. And you hear these readings, you see the plots building up against Jesus, and then suddenly on Good Friday it's there in front of your eyes, everything that the prophet has said.
These are days when the church reflects on the last days of Jesus' earthly life. These days are commemorated through various church services where hymns and scriptures are recited, following the same cycle of events recorded in the story as told by the evangelists. In the home, Christians are meant to spend more time focusing on prayer during this period. Most families also use this time for spring cleaning. It is said that cleaning the house during these days is similar to the Jewish tradition of cleaning before the Pesach. Good Friday. The celebration of Good Friday is, according to some historians, a custom which originated in the 4th century. Over the centuries, the day gradually became the time of penance and fasting. At the anniversary of the crucifixion, and according to Christians, the death of Christ, many churches hold quiet services from noon until 3, called Treor, or 3 hours. This service focuses on the words Jesus uttered as he hung on the cross, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, which means, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? Good Friday is a sombre time in the Catholic Church. Thus there are no flowers, and the altar, the chancel, statues, pictures, and the cross are all draped in black to represent mourning. However, once again, there are no biblical teachings that direct Christians to celebrate Good Friday. Not all Christians do so, with some churches refraining from communion until Resurrection Sunday. Holy Saturday. This is the last day of the Triduum, in the Holy Week, and the 40-day Lenten fast, which commemorates Jesus lying in the tomb. Holy Saturday is a day to be observed as quietly as possible. This day is also known as the Day of the Entombed Christ, when Christians reflect on the passion, suffering, and death of Jesus, and how he was finally laid to rest in his tomb. No services are held on this day. The worshippers spend the day quietly reflecting, and this leads them to the Easter Vigil.
Easter Vigil is known as the mother of all vigils. On this night, Christians remember the great pain and suffering inflicted upon Jesus, and they also mourn his death.
The Easter Vigil. On this night, Christians all over the world will gather in the darkness representing their sombre reflections of the day. The reason why this vigil takes place during the night is because it is believed to coincide with Jesus' resurrection, which also occurred during the night. During this night, worshippers silently pray and focus on the hours when they believe Jesus slowly came back to life. They also celebrate his profound sacrifice for their sins. The Easter Vigil rites begin with the lighting of a new flame or fire, which represents Jesus' return from the darkness of death, bringing with him the new light of hope and salvation through his resurrection.
On Easter Sunday, many Christians rise before dawn, face towards the rising sun, and rejoice the resurrection of Jesus. Was this practice taught in the Gospel, or is it in direct contravention of biblical teachings?
Easter Day. Sunrise service. While this custom is not practiced by all Christians, some will participate in the Easter sunrise service, when worshippers rise before dawn on Easter Day and go to an elevated place or to the side of a church and face towards the rising sun. After the sun rises, the worshippers sing an Easter hymn praising the resurrection of Jesus whilst holding spring flowers. They close this service by holding hands and praying together, and then proceed to prepare for church services. The Old Testament mentions a similar practice in Ezekiel 8, 1-18, where Ezekiel saw that the people of Israel were facing towards the east when the sun rose, and worshipping the sun. This was strictly forbidden, as it constituted sun worship. But this is exactly what worshippers do in the Easter sunrise service. If Jesus did not instruct this kind of worship, then where did it come from? On Easter Day, Christians celebrate and rejoice Jesus' sacrifice of his life to free mankind from sin. It is widely believed amongst the Christian world that Jesus was a sacrificial lamb offered at the Passover, as mentioned in Exodus 12, 13-14.
It's not a holiday that's enshrined in the Bible, certainly not like, say, the Eucharist, where you can look back and say that Jesus said, do this in memory of me, therefore you can build a theology around the Eucharist. You really can't. I think it's something that Christians have decided to commemorate as a way of teaching themselves on a yearly basis their theology.
From the biblical accounts of the New Testament, it is determined that Jesus was put on the cross when he was observing the feast of the Passover. But Jesus did not predict or indicate that this would happen. So where does the concept of Jesus atoning for the sins of mankind as the paschal or sacrificial lamb originate? It emerged from the Christians celebrating the death of Jesus with the paschal meal, Eucharist, on the lunar date of the Jewish Passover. Purge out therefore the old leaven, that ye may be a new lump, as ye are unleavened. For even Christ, our Passover, is sacrificed for us. Therefore let us keep the feast, not with old leaven, neither with the leaven of malice and wickedness, but with the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth. Corinthians 5, 7-8. These verses prove that it was Paul's teaching to replace the Old Testament Passover. His New Testament concept of the Passover allowed Christ to supersede the paschal lamb. Despite Paul's claims to love and honor Jesus, he did not hesitate to replace the Old Testament Passover, which Jesus and his disciples followed, with his new concept.
Easter is an Anglo-Saxon word, obviously only in English, and it comes from an Anglo-Saxon goddess who was Eostra, who was the goddess of the spring, because Easter in our part of the world happens at spring. And so they took the old pagan name and stuck it on it because the pagans would then think they could convert.
The word Easter represents the festival observed by many Christian churches in honor of the resurrection of the Saviour. Easter is a word used in Germanic languages to denote the festival of the vernal equinox. The word Easter is not found anywhere in the Old or New Testament, except for one reference in the King James Bible. And when he had apprehended him, he put him in prison, and delivered him to 4 quaternions of soldiers to keep him, intending after Easter to bring him forth to the people. Acts 12:4. After examining biblical evidence, one may assume that the festival of Easter may have been observed during the time of the apostles. According to the New Bible Dictionary, the original word in the above translation has no reference to that, nor is there any evidence that any such festival was observed at the time when this book was written. The original word should have been Passover, Pascha, not Easter.
So what are the origins of Easter customs such as hot cross buns, Easter eggs and Easter bunnies? Could it be that Easter has pagan origins? Then how and why did Easter become associated with Jesus and the Bible?
As the observation of Easter is not instructed